Sure, and I think there's two sides. Like there's two different areas. So in developed countries, like we just been talking about, it's primarily a question of debt, debasement, where the money goes. And if you look at the other side, which is like developing countries, they often have a lot more extreme events. I mean, I spend part of each year in Egypt, and they're currently experiencing a currency crisis. And so they have over 30% inflation. Their currency has lost a tremendous amount of value compared to the dollar, even as the dollar itself has been debased. And that's happening in dozens of countries around the world. And so the a big theme that I cover in Broken Money is that this was largely a technological phenomenon. So ever since, if you go back to kind of the full history of banking, mostly what you're trying to do is make money more efficient. So gold is costly to move around, it's costly to verify, it's slow, and so most of the history of banking was how can we move this faster by moving it as little as possible. So, for example, you deposit gold in a third party, and then if me and you are both using the same party, and I want to send money to you or you want to send money to me, we just contact that third party and say debit from this account, add to this account. And that just represents our claims of that gold moving, and that trusted third party just keeps holding the gold. That way, the gold has to move and get verified less often. That's kind of the multi-century history of banking for the most part. And whenever that kind of blows up, you add another layer of centralization. You kind of just built centralization on top of centralization on top of centralization. And what really kind of kicked it into high gear was the introduction of the telegraph. And so that was invented in the 1830s, but it wasn't really widely deployed until the 1860s. So cross continent, cross Atlantic Ocean, connecting the Western world. By the early 19th century, it crossed the Pacific. It kind of connected the rest of the world over time. And by that point, we could move transactions at the speed of light around the world. But of course, we still couldn't move the physical settlement. And so over time, this fractured into increasingly centralized systems. They dropped gold backing entirely, and there's not really been a viable alternative for that time. And so we kind of find ourselves in a world where there's 160 different fiat currencies or so. Most of them rapidly lose value. A handful of the best ones lose value slowly. Most of the other ones are not wanted anywhere outside of their jurisdiction, right? So, for example, I have Egyptian pounds and Norwegian kroner in the drawer next to me, and there's very little way to spend them here in New Jersey. There's even converting them to other assets. There's very little uh, liquidity for that. They basically lose all of their monetary properties outside of their jurisdiction in a similar way that arcade tokens or casino chips lose value outside of their very narrow defined kind of issuer regions. um, and there's only a handful of kind of global assets that connect that all together. And so one of the contentions I make in the book is that even though the broader crypto space has been filled with hype and fraud and scams and things like that, that Bitcoin and some of the underlying technology and things like stable coins are actually powerful innovations that are solving problems and that are probably going to surprise a lot of people to the upside in the years ahead in terms of what their staying power is like and what they end up changing.